Welcome to 21st Men. My name is Dr. Cornelius Jones, and
I'm AJ, your friendly neighborhood pharmacist. And we're here to talk about dating and relationships in general. So let's just start about dating in the 21st century. So to be honest, as a man myself, I learned that I had to learn to date myself. There's a point, I was single 3 separate occasions. And what I mean by that is in a relationship, broke up, in a relationship, broke up, in a relationship, broke up, and then I'm in a relationship right now. But in those stages, me being single became greater and greater. And I learned that I need to learn to be comfortable with myself, learn to date myself. Went to movies, theaters by myself. I went to eat by myself. I went on a long drives by myself. I drove 3 hours to another state to visit somebody by myself, and just learning about myself, meditating, learn what type of music I like, learn what type of foods I like. And that set me in place to talk to that about myself to other women that I was in a relationship with. Like, hey, this is what I like. No, I don't like that. I don't like this. So being single and learn to communicate with women about what I like as a man, what I want in a relationship. So being a man in the 21st century as yourself, what's some things about dating that you find important or that you don't like?
well, AJ, I'm married, so the only person I date is my wife,
Gotcha.
right? And I date her once a week. I make that a priority. But however, I do understand the challenges that you're speaking about. And I've often jokingly said that the dating pool in the 21st century seem to have pee in it. There don't seem to be a lot of good choices on either side, and the reason I know that is because I talk to a lot of women and they tell me about the challenges that they have with men, and I also hear from young men talking about what it's like to try to find a proper mate with women. So it's all about you finding somebody not to complete you because you're already complete, and that's the mistake a lot of people make. What you should look for is somebody that compliments you, and I think if you find somebody that compliments you, then you're headed in the right direction.
Gotcha. Yeah, me personally, I really don't think it was that hard to find a mate. I mean, see, I'm engaged now, and it wasn't hard to find my fiance who I'm engaged with now, and it stemmed with me learning more about myself, dating other women, and knowing that what I want in a relationship.
Okay. So what I'm hearing you say is, by dating women before your fiance, you had the opportunity to decide what you like, what you didn't like, what you wanted versus what you didn't want.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
And that's important, right? And the only time that we can figure that out is with experience. You have to have some type of experience with dating before you know that this is the person that's right for you. And, when we talk about dating, there's also roles and responsibilities, which in this day and age, I find that to be slightly outdated, considering no one likes gender roles anymore until it comes to dating, because there's a convenience with that. What's your take on that?
So I want to go back to what you were saying about no one believes in gender roles. That is so true. I just listened to a podcast by Dr. Boyce Watkins, and he was discussing men wearing dresses nowadays. And in society, if you look at Hollywood, they celebrate the black men who are feminine in nature, and they celebrate women who are masculine in nature. I believe that is so backwards. I don't know where that came from. That's not where I learned from my parents, seeing the role models that my parents instilled in me. And so as a man, I believe that I should be the leader of the household. I should be the leader in my future marriage when it comes to finances and where we're going to go in a direction as a family. And so that's personally what my thoughts are about being a man in the house, being a provider for my family, and just being a lover for my wife, and being a loving father to my future kids. So what are your thoughts about what I just said about gender roles?
I think, let me address one of the things you said before, right? From a historical context, the Romans, who were great warriors, they wore dresses. Now, I do understand what you're saying about in this day and age,
right,
where there seems to be an agenda, especially when it comes to the black community. You see some of that stuff more in the black community than any other culture. And I think that's by design. right? To make the male look weaker and things like that. But in regards to the way that my wife and I do our business is together we make decisions. But if it comes down to a decision has to be made, then I make the executive decision. It doesn't mean that I'm minimizing her by any means, but at some point when you get stuck, someone has to go ahead and pull the trigger. And there's nothing wrong with that. So I hope that shed light and answered that question. It doesn't mean that if I want to do something today or when I leave here, I'm going to pick up the phone and ask my wife for permission or any of that. And that's one of the misconceptions about relationships. You don't have to give up who you are in order to be with somebody that you care about. And in the dating community today, that seems to be one of the things where people, they focus so much on being independent. But here's the truth, AJ. The minute you become married, you're no longer independent, right? You are dependent on one another.
That's good.
And people, they forget that part because when I hear people say that, but you're married, what do you mean you're an independent woman, you're an independent man? And by the way, congratulations, that's a part of being an adult. You're supposed to be able to stand on your own. So you don't get a cookie from me from that either, right?
Good, that's good. So what I'm hearing is being vulnerable in the relationship. As a man in a relationship, just speaking from your relationship with your wife, you work together, but when a trigger needs to be pushed or the trigger needs to be pulled, you make that final decision. Absolutely. And I like that, just being as a strong dependent man in a relationship, but at the same time being true to yourself and being a leader in your relationship, just as you are in the community. I like it. That's very inspirational to me.
And that's another thing we as men, we have to take on that responsibility of understanding that if I'm going to ask her to trust me to lead her, I first got to give her something to follow.
Repeat that again.
If I'm going to ask her to allow me to lead her, I first got to give her something to follow.
To follow.
Right? You can't follow somebody that's
good,
walking in the wrong direction.
That's good. Yeah, so I have a lot of ideas about my future family. I want my family to be independent. And what I mean by that, because going off of what you were saying, I want to own businesses for my family. I want my family to own a business. I want to own a business myself so that I could pass it on to my kids. And that's one of the blueprint that I have for my family in the future. And so just listening to what you're saying about the woman wanting to listen to the man and wants the man to help guide them in the direction for the family, I like hearing that. I really feel called to lead my family, my future family, in that direction as well. I'm still learning a lot about my woman. I'm still continue to learn about my woman. And when that marriage comes about, it's just going to add other things that we're still got to learn and tackle on. But it's a partnership. And I love her so much that I'm willing to go that journey with her. I saw you shaking your head. What do you mean by it?
So it's funny you used the word partnership, right? Okay. And one thing that I do my best to teach couples is that partnerships are a failed system, an idea. Okay. Because anything that operates at a 50% capacity, a 60-40, 80-20, in most cases is inoperational, right? Okay. And that's what people fail to understand. You're setting yourself up for failure. And then also, you brought up about business. Partnerships are great for business, but they're horrible for marriages, in relationships in general, because partnerships aren't designed to last. And a lot of folks don't understand that. If you think about a law firm, you think about a medical firm, you think about any of these partnerships, they are pulled together for a specific purpose, for a specific time. But the approach that I teach, as well as I take in my own marriage, is team. We're Team Jones. Okay. Right? Because on any team, players use their skill sets for the betterment of the team.
So you wouldn't equate teamwork as a partnership? That's not one and the same? No. Or that can't equal?
It could, but when we're talking about relationships.
I got you.
Right? I walk people into traps sometimes when they come through the doors and I say, hey, are you guys, how do you identify yourself? Are you guys partners? And they say, you know, yes, because that's what they've been conditioned through social culture, conditioning to say. But then when I give them that perspective about the team, they change their outlook on it.
Okay.
Because again,
As a team, we're trying to win.
a partner, you're just going to come with what you have. And then when the relationship starts getting rocky, partners, they're going to already begin to form the idea, I'm just going to take my stuff or my part and get away from it.
Okay.
But no team member brings anything to the team other than their skills. And you and your wife or your fiance will forever be working on those skills throughout your marriage.
It's good.
You know, as you guys transition from being engaged to husband and wife,
Yes,
that's
sir.
a lifelong commitment,
Yes, sir.
right? And that's another part of the problems with relationships these days, whether you're single or engaged or married. People don't have commitment issues. They have issues with committing to certain things and certain people. Right? So, and then when we find ourselves in those situations, like, well, you just have a commitment issue. No, because every single day we make a decision on what we're going to wear, what we're going to eat. You don't have a commitment issue. You have an issue with committing to the people. And that's something that a lot of singles struggle with.
That's real. That's real. As a married man yourself, and as a counselor in marriage, what do you think is the most important key? You may have touched on it already, but what do you think for someone such as myself who's getting into marriage next year? What's the most important thing in marriage?
Great question. I would say respect, right? Most people, they think it's communication. But when you begin to explore and ask certain questions, you discover that they don't have a communication issue because they're talking. But they lack the respect of listening to what the other person is really saying. Because, you know, it's you didn't hear what I said. It's best to understand than to try to be understood. But when you're having those aggressive exchanges of words, no, you didn't hear what I said. No, you didn't. You're right. Nobody is hearing what the other person is saying because you have to be in a position to make sure that you are understanding. Right? So to me, respect. If you respect your fiance, soon to be wife, that's going to carry over with your finances. That's going to carry over with the way that you talk to her, the way that you talk about her to other people, even when you're upset with her. That's going to reflect itself even when it comes to the privacy of your marriage. You ain't gonna pick up the phone and call mom and them and your boys and be like, man, let me tell you about her. Because at that point, you're also being disrespectful. And you're going to respect her enough if she leaves her phone down, not to pick her phone up. Because a lot of couples, AJ, make the mistake of believing that because we're in this relationship that I have a right to look in your phone. But let me tell you a secret. That actually falls under emotional abuse. But folks don't even realize it. It's psychological abuse because you are violating that person's privacy. And the marriage or relationship doesn't give you the right to go through somebody else's stuff. So
I agree.
If you ever find yourself going in that direction, pull back, pick up the phone and give me a call.
All right. I'm looking forward to marriage. What drove me from dating by myself to being in a dating relationship with my now fiance to being engaged now is I knew she was the one. I knew this is somebody that is looking for my best interest, looking for the best interest for our future, and she's looking in the best interest for herself. And she's a believer in God. What's driving me to seeking the marriage right now is part of it is finances, to be honest. We want to have an adult wedding. We're looking forward to it. We got friends who are supplying the help and giving us the needs that we want. Another thing too is just feeling called to get myself right and being the independent man that I want to be before going into the relationship and being the whole individual. Let me rephrase that, being the whole individual that I want to be before going into the relationship. And so I'm excited for marriage. I'm learning to build on my relationship with God and build a relationship with myself before going into that. And I'm looking forward to it.
That's awesome. Well, it sounds like you already are going into it, right? Because you've already popped the question.
Yes, sir.
So a lot of times, and how long have you and your fiance been dating?
2 years.
2 years. it's ironic that you say that, because I tell men and women that anything more than 24 months and it becomes a waste of time. Right? You have to date with a purpose. And if you're not dating with the purpose to get married, then there's no purpose in dating. And it sounds like you already have figured that out, and that you're already on the track to make her into your wife. A lot of people struggle with that, AJ, to where they use and find a lot of reasons to where I'm still working on myself. Listen, at some point you have to do an inventory and say, either this isn't the person for me, or there's more that I want to explore, but don't waste anybody's time. And that's a huge problem, and it leads to a lot of pain and resentment for people in the future. So I'm proud of you for being able to recognize that this is the woman that you wanted to marry, and I was the same way. I knew that my wife was the woman that I want to spend the rest of my life with early. I didn't put any kind of time frame on how long we needed to date before we got engaged, or how long we needed to be engaged before we got married, or any of those things, because the engagement is a dress rehearsal for the marriage. You practice like you're going to play, right? And during that time period, you have to make sure that you're paying attention to all the small things. Like, does this woman, does this particular thing get on my nerve? Because sometimes people can be so caught up with the infatuation of it all that they miss that stuff, and then they later say, well, you're not the person I married, or you didn't used to be that way. Well, yes, they did. You just overlooked it because you were so engulfed with the idea of what you thought that was going to be. But as long as you go into this marriage, understanding that every single day is going to be different, having somebody that you can talk about your future plans and build together with, that's what it's all about.
I'm looking forward to that. I do have a question though.
Yes, sir.
They do say when you get in marriage, do you believe that we evolve as human beings? And what I mean by that is we're constantly changing, learning new things, want to be better, aspire to be better. I certainly hope so, especially here in the black community, but in the black relationship as well, black marriage. So do you believe that as a man, I'm going to continue to pursue my wife? I'm going to continue to learn more about her. It's never going to be one conditional thing. Like, okay, I know who you are now, we're good. No, it's going to always be a process. Is that a thing or no?
No, that's the thing.
Okay, all right.
Right? Because anything that's not growing is dying, right? Change is the only evidence of life. So the mistake that people look back on relationships and say, well, you changed to me. Well, guess what? They were supposed to. If you're the same person when you marry her 10 years down the line, then you failed. And if she's the same person that you married, then she's failed. You guys are supposed to be able to see the growth. But if you can't see the growth at that point, because you're 27, so that means, you'll be 37 years old, then you really need to have to do an evaluation on your life. So listen, I really appreciated this wonderful conversation today. Think so many different nuggets came out of it, and I certainly respect your perspective and the things that you had to say as well.
Yeah, I learned a lot from you too, so I appreciate it, and thank you. I appreciate the knowledge.
Absolutely.